there is no road to happiness. Happiness is the road. You can't really say, now that I have all this, I'm successful. But what you can do is you can have a successful day. You're trying to be who you want to be. You're trying to help somebody if you can, and you're not going to hurt anybody if you can. That's a successful day, I think. It's just waking up and making a decision. Who do I want to be? How do I want to behave? That's what I'm going to do. And everything else just falls nicely into place.
Welcome to The Path to Wealth, the show about well-being, fulfillment, and financial freedom. I'm your host, Hannes Henchen. Welcome back to The Path to Wealth. Today we have Louis O'Connor from Strategic Metal Invest. He has quite a journey around the world, all the way from Ireland back to South America and back to Ireland. And he's been investing into strategic metals for quite some time himself, and he's going to tell us more about what that means. Those are those little metals that make your phone and all your electronics work. So we're quite excited. It's a little bit off topic from us from multifamily real estate, but we're excited to learn more today. And he has an exciting journey overall in life. So welcome to the show, Louis.
Hannes, thank you very much. I'm happy to be here.
So maybe give us a little bit of context. What are those strategic metals?
It is a good question. So my company is called Strategic Metals Invest, and strategic metals is an umbrella term for, in North America, they would call them technology metals. And they're also the rare earth metals, rare earth elements, which are basically oxides. Oxide is a powdered form of rare earths. And then also, even now, somebody has coined the term green metals, which are the metals that are needed and critical to electric cars, so electric mobility, also solar power, wind power. But, they pretty much power our daily lives. I mean, aviation, medical devices, nuclear reactors, they're just about we handle them and we see them every day in our daily life.
So we have them in our fingers every day, but probably we don't even know the names or the function of many of those metals. So when you're saying the green metals, what are you referring to? And probably you're going to have a couple of names here for us that we've never heard of.
Yeah, and hard to pronounce, but we don't have to get the pronunciation right first time. So gallium, for example, is a metal that you'll find in just about everything. And then we have rhenium, indium, tellurium. And then the oxides, which I mentioned, are the powdered form. For example, indium, you couldn't swipe your phone without indium, But the oxides are more what would be praseodymium, neodymium, dysprosium, terbium oxide. So I suppose, what I should maybe explain, Hannes, is there are 17 rare earth metals, and only 10 of them are rare. Some of them are not all that rare. So from my perspective, from my business, which is we offer private investors the ability to purchase and own these raw materials and store them and profit from owning them. Just exactly the same paradigm as owning gold or silver. Yeah. You physically own the asset, you store it, and then as a store of wealth, as a hedge against inflation, and then when you want to liquidate, you can liquidate. What I would add quickly is our metals actually have outperformed gold and silver, the precious metals, if you will, consistently, like for the last 5 years. And I'll just give you some quick numbers just to give you an idea. So gold, between 2017 and 2021, gold went up 58%, so little over 11% a year, whereas strategic metals are consistently up and on average of about between 34 and 35%. That's the 10 metals that we offer. So as an investment, they're more than a hedge against inflation. They're profitable to own. Um, and then the one thing I would say is we sort of focus the ones that are sort of rare, and coincidentally are the ones that are going up most in value, are the ones that are critically needed in this sort of surge in demand we have for sustainable energy. I mean, the whole world is going to go through this transformation over the next 5 to 8 to 10 years. And these are the metals such as neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, terbium. These are the ones that are critically needed for those particular industries. But they're actually needed across the board. I mean, they're in all modern technology. So, demand is already there, but it's already increasing in these sectors as well.
So, how much of those metals is actually used in our devices? Like, if you're saying that they compounding in the price around 30%, some of them at least, that sounds like an insane compounding curve. And does that mean that our devices will get like insanely expensive, or is the quantity that is being used rather minuscule, but it's needed to ultimately make them work?
Yes, yeah, that's a good point. So yeah, like there's now in one iPhone there's like 12, actually maybe 13 rare earths in just one iPhone. But as you said, they're in very, very, small amounts, which at this current, this moment in time, we don't have, and we're not likely to have the technology to recycle those elements because they wouldn't, if you can separate them and even you can imagine how labor intensive it would be to extract
Yeah.
12 different rare earths from one phone. And then so that's one of the reasons that the prices have been going up, is they're not recyclable. Possibly what might happen in the future is we'll discover, we're discovering new rare earth elements all the time. There was one just recently discovered and named in Switzerland. So that's why they're called rare, because they're sort of you never find them alone. They're always a part of, they have to be sort of, the refining process and the separation process is very complicated. So we might find some, well, just to give you one idea on what you're talking about, which will save us from recycling. Um, you might be familiar with the term photovoltaics.
Yeah.
And photovoltaics is thin film solar cells. Now, because of what's going to happen, that technology is getting better and better and better. Over the next 3 to 5 to 10 years, what you'll see is you won't need to charge your iPhone because it'll have the thin film solar technology all around it. So it'll automatically charge just, when you're moving around, and, also from the solar. Same for, Fitbits and smartphones. You're because of indium ability to absorb and transform energy, we'll do away with chargers. So they will be useful in that regard, that we won't need to recycle them anyway. The same is happening for wearable medical devices. A house and an office building will have thin film solar cells in the windows, but also on the side and the roof. The roofs of you'll see cars that will just, the whole exterior will. That's where we're heading, and we don't have the infrastructure yet. So luckily, that means we won't have as much waste.
But that sounds a little bit like, to me, the pilot project of the kind of the photovoltaic road that used to be probably a decade ago in the Netherlands, but I've never really seen that taking off. And the original idea was to basically cover the world roads and have electrified roads that earn money, or at least produce electricity instead of just pouring money into literally concrete. But I haven't really seen any application for that. Do you really think the next couple of years will have such a technical development that we literally don't have to charge our phone?
Yes, for smart, for smart smaller devices like Fitbits and smartphones, and yes, But on a larger scale, I think that'll take longer. What it is they're constantly revolutionizing the ability, the potency, the strength. And at the moment, they don't have enough there. And it's a bit like scaling up a business, or you start sort of quite small, and over time you learn, through economics and mathematics and experience, that you can then scale up. So they're sort of scaling within the technology as we speak. But certainly in the next 3 to 5 years, you will not. The technology is very, very new, but in the very near future, you won't have to charge the phone. You won't have to charge the Fitbit. Just the solar rays and the energy from movement will do that. And it's because of rare earths in particular, because of indium, that you can do that.
So, how does one store those metals? You mentioned it earlier, we could basically buy them similar to gold and silver, but is it something that we could actually store at home?
No, I mean you could, but it would be of no value as an investment, because who the only end buyer for these products are industry buyers, such as Siemens in Germany, Apple Computers, BMW, Ford Motor Company. So unless it's a hobby and you like to collect rare earths, then there wouldn't be, obviously today we're speaking in the context of as an investment play.
Yeah.
And I want to take you close to your hometown in Germany, to Frankfurt, and I'll explain the characteristics of the investment. And there's three very important safety characteristics that differ from, say, owning gold or silver. So I'll just use gold and silver as a sort of a paradigm, as an explanation to begin. So if you wanted to buy gold today, you can probably, go somewhere in Manhattan and buy it over the counter if you wanted, and bring it home and store it. And likewise, you could liquidate it tomorrow if you wanted. Or you could go online, you could buy it and physically own it and store it in a vault in Switzerland or in Singapore or in Delaware. And because of, the market cap for gold is $11.4 trillion. So you don't have to worry about when you want to liquidate it, right? Now, that's the key difference with rare earths, is the only end buyer are industry buyers. So in order to do this safely and securely, and what I want to say first, and I say this with certainty, is we're the only industry supplier in the world that offers this option to investors. There is nobody else who's an industry buyer, right?
Yeah.
And that being in the industry is the key part of the success. So the first thing we offer is the investor is buying industrial grade, high value assets from an industry supplier based in Frankfurt in Germany, who have over 30 years experience in the business. And the key thing to their business is not the investment side. The key thing is that 80% of their business activities are buying these rare earths and reselling them to industry buyers. If they didn't have that access to both the production and the supply chain, then there's no point in even attempting to do this, because, there's no point in you or I, Hannes, having, $100,000 worth of gallium or indium in a safe, here at home. Not as an investment anyway. It might be nice to look at, but, who are you going to sell it to? Unless you're going to make phones or, magnets for electric cars, then, there's no point in the asset being, out of the chain of custody.
Yeah.
So the chain of custody is very important. So yeah, the first thing we offer that you're buying, sort of, the industrial grade with analysis reports, chain of custody information, purity levels. The second thing we offer then is storage. You can store them. We have a sister company also in Frankfurt. It was an air raid bunker in World War II, which 12 years ago in 2010 was converted to a bank level secure vault with, armed guard, bonded. It's a Zollager, which you'd be familiar with as a tax-free bonded duty-free zone.
Maybe you can touch up a little bit on that for the audience so they kind of get the gist of it, what that means for them as investors.
Okay, yeah, it's a sort of critical point. So look, let's say somebody bought $100,000 worth of our metals, right? We ordered them from the producer. They usually come in about. I just had a client who ordered 5 weeks ago, and they've just arrived in just on 5 weeks, so about a month, maybe 6 weeks. So when they arrive, what we recommend. Now, this is just a recommendation because at that point in time, the investor owns the metals. We don't own them any longer. But our sort of delivery includes delivery to the vault in Frankfurt. We recommend you store them with us then. And the storage fee is 2% a year. And the reason for that is they're being stored in a vault that adheres to industrial standards. The vault has an ISO 9001 quality assurance certificate for rare earth metal storage consistently since they opened. So the reason for that is some of the metals over a long period, if they're stored for a very long period of time, if they're not stored correctly, they can lose their purity levels. And if that happens, then they're not as relevant or valuable. So we recommend you store them with us rather than if you wanted to, and I'll just use this as an example. If somebody said, no, I don't want to store them in Germany, I want them here in New York. Now you can do that, but you're just incurring additional expenses. You'll have to pay the transportation to New York. You'll have to pay the taxes probably to import them. And then you'll have to possibly have them, let's say you came back to us then in 5 years and you said, okay, my metals have doubled in value and I'm ready to liquidate. Well, if they have been out of the chain of custody, they probably would have to be retested. And that means more expenses for you. So you can physically take delivery anywhere in the world, but we recommend you store them with a sister company of ours, which doesn't break the chain of custody, which means if you came to us on any given day and said, okay, I'm ready to liquidate, we can sell them that day for you. So the storage also allows for the product to be extremely liquid. If it leaves the chain of custody, it has to be sort of tested back in, and that can take time and be expensive. Did I explain it okay?
Yeah, of course. I mean, just for the general investor, it sounds already rather complicated to have something shipped around the world, and then you have those very specific storage needs. But obviously, we're talking about something that is not for the everyday investor, and it's something for the savvy or maybe adventurous investor.
Yeah, exactly. I suppose the best way to look at it is when people buy the metals, they own the metals, and I have to explain that because, some people would be sort of, well, if I own them, then why can't I store them? Now, you absolutely can. They're your metals. However, this, as we sort of already discussed, is the only way this comes to a successful conclusion and a profitable conclusion is when you liquidate them to an industry buyer. And we're the only ones that can do that. So it makes sense to keep them, in the custody and in the chain of custody with an industrial buyer. I mean, as I said, if a client came to me today to liquidate, we would sell them and he would receive his funds in 3 to 4 working days. Whereas if you have moved them to Switzerland or somewhere else, you could be looking at, first of all, costly, and it'll take more time to liquidate them.
Yeah, obviously, once you start shipping around your rare earth metals, then you're adding costs all over the place. So maybe in that particular case, it might just make sense to store them with the one who can actually liquidate them. So when we're looking at liquidation, you mentioned that it could happen in the same day. But I'm sure that someone like Siemens doesn't order a small amount. So would you just bundle, for example, my existing stockpile into an existing order that has been placed to liquidate it?
Yeah, exactly. It's called collective custody. So, like to give you an idea, Siemens are one of our clients, but they're a conglomerate. They have probably 100 different purchasing departments in as many countries. So um, every month Siemens order rare earth with us, and have been doing so for more than 20 years. However, they wouldn't be typically our client. Companies like Siemens and say Volkswagen and Ford Motor Company, right now, particularly for electric cars, they're sourcing their own independent direct supply chain. So they're doing joint ventures with producers. So they
Yeah.
wouldn't really be our best client, and we're a little bit below that. We're sort of in the middle. Like, give you an idea, like typically one of our clients, might be, a German manufacturer, say, of medical devices. They might have two factories in Germany. They might have two in the US. They might have two in, the Middle East. They might have 100 to 500 employees. So we service industrial buyers that are not conglomerates, I suppose is the best word. But yeah, if somebody came to me on Monday morning and said, I'd like to liquidate all my assets, then we would make an offer. We'd have a look exactly what orders we have going out that day or that week, and we'll come back then with the offer. Obviously, it's all relevant to the current market price, but we'll make the offer to the client on the same day and say, this is the price. If they're happy with that offer, and then they just send us an email to say, yeah, please liquidate, then within 3 to 4 working days after that, they'll actually have received their funds. So that's exactly it, though. That's how we liquidate them. Is we have, just to give you an idea, Hannes, in the vault we have over 200 metric tons of rare earths. Less than 25% of those materials are investor owned. So the ratio between the investor inventory and our own inventory is 25 to 75%, and it will always remain that way because we are guaranteeing the liquidation, and we have to be very, very careful that we can always liquidate.
So in any given case, you might just liquidate into your own storage capacity if you think it might be an attractive trade.
Yeah, that's also possible. There's three options, I suppose, really. Is one, we would have a look at what orders we have right there and then. So we would just resell those to the industrial client. We might have other investors who are buying at that moment in time. And if we, based on what we have in our own stocks, we could buy from the buyer and just, replenish our own stocks. So that would be the three options for liquidation.
Yeah. So speaking from an international investor's perspective, if we're located in the United States as a potential investor and our assets are stored and liquidated in Germany, could you speak to some, and I know you're not a CPA and this is not tax advice by any means, but maybe you can speak to the kind of the tax circumstances that apply to an international investor?
Yes, yeah, and you're right. I mean, obviously, I can only speak for the jurisdiction I'm in. So as I mentioned, the vault is a duty free zone. So exactly the same as storing in Switzerland or Singapore. If you own the metals, if the investor holds them for a minimum of 1 year, then there's no taxes in Europe, meaning there's no taxes when you purchase and there's no taxes when you liquidate if you've held them for a minimum of a year. Um, you know, Capital gains and your own jurisdiction, obviously that's up to the investor. They have to do their own reporting and their annual accounting. So I can only speak obviously, but from our side there are none if they own them at least a year.
Yeah. So as long as the international investor is not short trading them in any way and is actually holding on to them for some time, they only need to cover their own kind of a tax reporting, which in the United States most likely has some consequences based that we're being taxed internationally, but that's up for your CPA to decide.
Correct. Look, we recommend what we call, I suppose, a medium or long-term play, 3 to 5 years. As we just discussed, if you'd invested 100,000 5 years ago and you bought all 10 metals we offer, your portfolio will be valued at 170, actually $275,000 today. So it's a sizable. We just suggest, of course, it's a speculation,
Yeah.
and we want to be clear about that. Supply and demand is in charge. They're not correlated at all to the stock market. It's purely supply and demand. There's huge demand, limited supply, which I'd like to talk about in a minute. However, if you're patient, again, if you look at the last 5 years, and we'll help you sort of have a prediction or have a look at what's the next 5 years should look like. There will be healthy returns, and the way I sort of usually have a conversation with my sort of prospective investors is decide before you do the investment how much you'd like to earn. If you're happy to say get 20% return a year, until you've doubled your money, then as soon as you double your money, exit. But if you look at the long-term view, the next till about 2030, 2035, there's just great potential for continued very healthy returns.
Besides demand, what else drives the price? Is there an environment where there's potentially more mining capacity in the next decade or so? Or do you think there will be more technology application in the mining space that could potentially kind of drop the price point because we are capable of extracting more out of maybe already closed mines?
It's a very good question, and the answer sort of lies in everything you said. I think there'll be a little bit of a contribution from sort of everywhere. But what a lot of people wouldn't know, and it's not a big secret, it's sort of hidden in plain sight, is I'll go back a little bit in time first. In the 1980s, the US produced 60% of the world's rare earths. China at that time produced no more than maybe 15, 17%. Fast forward from then to now, China produces more than 80% of the world's rare earths. And crucially, they are responsible for more than 87% of refining. Now, the refining process is complicated and expensive. As I mentioned earlier, rare earths are, gallium, for example, is a byproduct of mining for aluminum. I'm just checking because over here we say aluminium. I know in America it's aluminum, so I wanted to say it correctly, aluminum. So you'll only find gallium as a byproduct of that, and it's the same for neodymium and indium and rhenium. So, supposed to give you an idea of how far ahead China is. It's a very complicated mathematical process, the refining. China has been doing this for more than a generation, and for the US and even Europe and the rest of the world to just sort of catch up overnight is not possible. It took a generation for China to get here. It'll take, it didn't happen overnight, and we won't sort of move away from this overnight either. Now, just to give you an idea, obviously you're in the US. There's one processing mine in North America, which is Mountain Pass in California. And all the raw materials they produce there are still sent to China to be refined.
Oh.
So there's no independent refining facility at the moment in North America. So, the US and Europe is sort of waking up to this a little bit and going, well, how did this happen?
Mm-hmm.
In fact, what you'll see in a very rare occurrence of agreement, both President Trump and President Biden both signed executive orders recognizing that the US needs to wean this dependence off China. But just recognizing it doesn't solve it overnight, So that's why for me, the next sort of 5-10 years will be as profitable as the last 5, because it's just going to take time there will be more production, as you said. There probably will be production and refining in America, but how long will that take? 3 years, 5 years, 10 years?
Yeah, to build out that capacity obviously always takes some time. We've seen that in the latest chip shortage, and companies like Tesla, who kind of saw that coming, they did their homework, but the rest of the industry was really struggling to work around that bottleneck. And in a similar fashion, I would assume that if the entire processing or refining capacity is overseas, it will take a couple years to catch up and actually implement their own capabilities here.
Yes, yeah, 100%, Hannes. Absolutely. I mean, look, it's no surprise Apple, is in China. I mean, all their stuff is made there. That's where the raw materials are. That's where they're refined. But yeah, you will see, you know, companies like Tesla, like just to give you two quick examples, Ford Motor Company just announced in the last 6 months they're going to build. It's the single largest investment in their entire history, 11.4 billion dollars in what they call mega campuses to build electric vehicles. BMW, within a few weeks of that, announced they need to source 20 billion euros of raw materials for electric cars. Now, they won't come to us,
Yeah.
right? They're too big for us, but they will set up their own supply chain. So, what new production comes along will probably be taken by the likes of Tesla, by the likes of BMW, by the likes of Ford. So that adds, additional pressure indirectly to the supply chain. And again, when there's surging demand, limited supply, it's good news for investors.
Yeah. And obviously, even though they might not be buying directly from you, you're always benefiting from that overall supply increase in the market dynamics.
Exactly. Look, and to be honest, like we wouldn't really, I mean, we do some business with Siemens but we wouldn't want to do too much business with these big, because they have, they have very professional purchasing departments and they're very well drilled on, constantly getting a better deal and a better deal and a better deal. So, they wouldn't be our ideal client as big as they are. But below them in the middle is, where most of the business is anyway. And, like I said, a medical device factory in Japan, for example, who wouldn't have, the resources or the time or a purchasing department to sort of, and they wouldn't be buying enough to buy direct from a producer. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Whereas, they'd come to somebody like us who's, got 30 years in the business. We have inventory. They've done business with us before. So yeah, like, you're talking, and of course it's always important how much is, you're buying in metric tons or you're buying in kilos. So the price is affected by that as well. But yeah, you're exactly right. Yeah.
Just last week, I was actually listening to Elon Musk responding to a question where he was even considering if the supply chain needs him to move into mining himself. And I mean, obviously he is vertically integrated in so many different ways, but that someone on his level is thinking about going straight to the source in a little sense of it, and at least contemplating if it's needed to sustain the deliverables for the car overall. And I mean, I would assume that someone on the likes of Siemens and Apple would not be as forward moving to actually go into mining. I think they would like to avoid that.
No, I would imagine though it's possible there's joint ventures there, where they'd be sort of maybe in partnership with producers and stuff. Absolutely, no question. Just funny you mentioned Elon Musk. Just very quickly, I'll tell you, there was a movie came out on Christmas Day called Don't Look Up, and I don't know if it was about a comet.
Yeah, I watched it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, there was a very funny line in that, and they had a sort of an Elon Musk type or Mark Zuckerberg. It was a sort of a parody on the tech billionaires, and his great idea was, rather than smash it all to pieces, let's mine it for rare earths. They actually quoted 3 of the metals we offer. So I mean it's a crazy idea, but the Chinese and the US, like NASA, are. I'm not saying this is going to happen ever, or but they are looking at ways to mine rare earths in outer space. I mean, who knows? That could be 150 years away, 100 years ago. So these raw materials are needed. I mean, again, in contrast, say, to gold and silver, why is gold up 10% a year, and why are rare earths up, nearly 40%? Well, because they have an intrinsic value, whereas
Yeah.
gold has an extrinsic sort of a perceived value. Now, I'm not saying one is necessarily, one should replace the other, but I think, in modern sort of portfolio theory, it makes sense to have as much diversification as possible. And if you do like precious metals, why not add rare earth metals as well?
And actually, that's an argument I've been hearing about gold, that it's actually not that rare at all once we go to outer space, and that it's rather quite common out there. So once the price of transportation from outer space to Earth, or the other way around, maybe drops to get actually equipment out there, that gold might not be that rare at all after all. So, but I mean, obviously, that's not an
Well,
immediate argument to devalue
yeah,
gold.
no, but it's a very good point, Hannes, because let's look at it this way, and this is absolutely true, right? If all the gold in the world disappeared tomorrow, it would make no difference whatsoever, right? Other than jewelry, right? If all the rare earths disappeared right now, everything would disintegrate around us. All our devices, airplanes wouldn't fly, cars wouldn't drive, hospitals wouldn't operate. So there's a very, it's an interesting discussion. I mean, look, gold has a perceived value. There's $11.4 trillion, I think, in the market, or 11.7 market cap in gold right now. But I suppose my point, I never ever would challenge anybody's beliefs
Yeah.
and say, oh, one is better than the other, because what works for me, and what works for you works for you. But I would definitely say that rare earths are a very strong argument to be in a portfolio alongside gold. Definitely, no
Yeah.
question.
Maybe let's wind back. Now we had a deep dive into the precious metals, but how did you get here, and why are you all about precious metal? What's your personal journey behind investing not only into precious metal but also making it accessible to more people?
It's a bit of a roundabout story, I grew up in Ireland, and this is probably going to sound counterintuitive, but I think I was a Buddhist, when I was supposed to be a Catholic, because in Buddhism they have a philosophy of aimlessness. I don't know if you're familiar with it, which is sort of forget about, stop chasing the results and just get out and sort of wander around. So we had no economic prosperity in Ireland when I grew up here. We also had a political situation with, very violent, bombs going off. And so I just wanted to wander the world, I wanted to get out. And I went to sort of, I mean, as you know, Ireland is an island on the western tip of Europe. We're European, but continental Europe, Central Europe is a totally different thing. So yeah, I went to Germany, and I had some friends in Heidelberg, and I sort of traveled as much of Europe as possible, in my 20s. I just loved going to new places, and still do. And then I think I went to Germany for 6 months, but I was there for about 6 years. And I said, oh, what happened to the rest of my traveling? But I ended up in Latin America and spent 15 years in Panama. And that's when I suppose I got more interested in sort of a career and work and things like that. And I suppose I just had an appetite for, I've noticed, and this is always true, that every generation experiences, some new product or some new technology, or, we had the dot-com boom in the 90s, and, every sort of 20 years or so, something comes around that is, interesting, for that adds value to, the population, or to whatever it might be. So I've always wondered, well, what's coming next? What will be the next big thing, or what will be the next interesting thing? So I started to go to conferences up in the US, all over the US, blockchain conferences, and crypto, and even, Freedom Fest, New Orleans investment conference, as much as I could. And that's when I first heard about rare earths at one of those conferences. And I didn't know anything about them, and I wanted to learn. And as I said, the company, my partner, the metals trader, is in Frankfurt, So they're the only one in the world to do this. And what I discovered was that, and you probably can relate to this, is they're sort of very low key and conservative and almost private about their
Yeah.
business. They hadn't really done any marketing. In fact, they had done probably no marketing outside of Europe. Now, one thing to remember is although they've been an industry supplier for 30 years, they've only been offering the option to investors for 12 years. So, they started this side business in 2010. And, at that time, there's 100 million people between Germany, Austria, Switzerland. So that was enough of a
Yeah.
market to begin with. And thankfully, they, in recent years, they extended the capacity of the vault. It's got 3 times the storage capacity it had before. So they've reinvested in the storage facility. And at that time, they were open to, taking on international a sales partner. So I went from being interested as an investor to as a business, and I was lucky enough. It was quite a sort of a process to become a partner, but I was lucky enough to come on board in 2020, which wasn't the best time, as the pandemic kicked off. But yeah, so I feel very blessed, fortunate to have found them, because I mean, it is commerce, it is transactional, but from a wellness perspective, it's a solid company. They're, as in Germany, you've got, great transparency, honesty, organization. So they're a great partner to have. Investors are making, a good profit. It's safe, it's secure. There's nothing in this business that would keep you up at night.
Yeah.
You can sleep well every day, and, of course, I have a doctor coming over from the US in June this month, and I have another gentleman coming in July. So for anybody, the minimum investment is only $10,000, but I'd say our average is people are investing between 50 and 100 to begin, and then most people invest the second and third time once they see they're making money. But I suggest come over and visit, come and touch and see and feel the vault, see 200 metric tons of raw materials. It's the best way to do due diligence, and I would meet people there and wine and dine them a little bit. As you know, Heidelberg is only a little over an hour south. The oldest university in Germany,
Yeah.
beautiful
Beautiful
town.
city.
The Weinstraße is
Yeah.
yeah, and the Rhine and the Weinstraße and is only another hour, maybe a little bit more, over by Wiesbaden, Mainz area. So, I'd always like to make nobody's going to fly from the States for one day. So we'll make a few
Yeah.
days of it and see the
Why? I
sights
just
as
fly
well.
in, I walk into the vault, and I fly back. No,
And not go to the Irish pub in Frankfurt,
no,
no?
we're going to skip that one. So maybe tell us a little bit more about your journey in Panama, because that in itself sounds rather exciting, to spend 15 years of your life overseas like this.
Yes. Yeah. One of the greatest, has been probably the greatest chapter nearly of, 15 years is such a long time. And I just love Latin America from the very, very beginning. There's something very, very special. I think it's connected to, for example, within the city limits of Panama City is a tropical rainforest. And they say, oh, it's the only city in the world with a tropical rainforest in the city limits. But I actually say the opposite is, it's the only tropical rainforest with a city in. So, and then to the east, you've got the Darien jungle, which borders Colombia, which is still, there's no road through there. You have to go either by boat or by plane around there. And then just in fact, Panama is quite a small country, but they've got 5 indigenous communities like comarcas, which are, independent regions for the Cunas, the Nobe Bugle, the Guaymi. So just something about the simplicity of the lifestyle. Obviously, the weather, the coming from Europe and 4 seasons, waking up every single day and the sun is shining is just great for your well-being. Having a coffee on your balcony in the sun every day of the year you can't beat that basically, right? And what the winters are like and stuff. So, um, it's my second home. I mean, it's become sort of my second. My kids were born in Panama. My two daughters are Panamanian and Irish, and their mum is Mexican. So yeah, I just can't say enough about it. It's just a lovely, lovely experience. And Colombia now, I began to visit Colombia a lot. Obviously, they ended a 52-year civil war. Colombian people are really, really nice, great characters, a great culture. They have their own food and their own identity. And Panama actually, unfortunately, the city and is very the U.S. built the canal there, so in the city they'd be very much like any city, I suppose, in the world, right? But when you get out of the cities and go to the beaches and the highlands and the mountains, and that's the real Panama, and the same for Colombia, and you're really going to a foreign country when you go to Colombia or when you go to the anywhere outside sort of
Yeah.
Panama City. So, and that's what I want to do. I don't want to go to a tourist location. I don't want to be in a queue or a line, for 4 hours to see something. So, but yeah, can't say enough. And you run out of time. I would have liked to see more of Venezuela. I did see quite a bit, but then things are not, not very safe.
You run out of time spending 15 years over there.
Yeah, I need these tech guys in California to extend our lifespan to 500 years so I can see all the world, because 70, 80 years is not enough.
It's not enough. Maybe if you eat well and you rest well, you sleep well, you can stretch it to 100 and you have another 20 years to wander around.
I'm working on it, yeah.
So, what is it like for you as a foreigner in South America to live there? Did you always feel like a foreigner, or was there eventually a feeling of, okay, I actually belong here? Because you did mention that it's your second home. Or did you always have that sense of like, well, I'm actually from Ireland, and now you're actually also back in Ireland? So, did you have that sense of this is my home, but it isn't at the end of the day, because culturally you're a guest?
Yeah, it's interesting. I suppose, luckily, when I first went to Panama in 1994, there was very few foreigners there, very few. And I suppose I didn't have much of a choice, but I learned Spanish and I was immersed in the culture. And so I felt at home very quickly, even when I was sort of struggling with the language and learning it, because I think the key to open that door is to learn, learn the local, if it's a foreign language, learn the local language, because as soon as, even if you're just in a shop or a taxi, if you're making an effort to speak to somebody in their own language, they respect it and they appreciate it, and they see that you're sort of willing to make a fool of yourself in order to communicate to them, and you get accepted, I think, right away for that willingness to humiliate yourself. so I felt at home amongst the locals. But I grew up in Dublin and Ireland, so from time to time I'd still always miss home. But I learned as well after my first few years in Germany is not to compare one to the other. Each country has its own unique flavors and smells and cultures, and just to sort of look for the similarities, as opposed to the differences. Because I actually worked with a lot of North Americans who were coming down to Panama, and I would take people sometimes on tours, and would be Belize, Nicaragua, Panama, and then Colombia. And the people that sort of liked it the most would be the ones that left their home country at home. Do you know what I mean? And arrived with a sort of an open mind. You can't sort of bring the restaurant culture of New York to Panama, right? Or the timetable of the German transport system to Panama, because you're going to be in trouble. It's that old saying, I'm sure you've heard it, which is as soon as you try to, as soon as you don't accept reality, or as soon as you try and do
Yeah.
battle with reality, you lose, and you lose
Yeah,
badly.
I mean, obviously, if you try to have like a Swiss clock kind of mindset going to South America, you will always be in a pickle.
Indeed, a pickle, a very polite word, yeah. But look, I think as well nowadays, most people, I'd say the majority of people are more well traveled than the previous generation. So they sort of, that comes with experience, with that, I mean, you're in the US, and, you go up in Germany. So, you've had that adaptation, if you will, and you understand that you can see clearly now the differences in the cultures, between each countries,
But as someone who lived in New York and has visited major cities, one also thinks all the major brands should be everywhere. It's quite interesting. There's been very few places I've been to where the major brands don't own a spot on the strip. Like even in the beautiful Heidelberg, next to
Yeah.
the castle, you will have a McDonald's right there. I mean, they managed to take off the golden M, and
Yes.
they made it like very gently in there. But all of those brands, they
Yes.
really land grab the world from the US.
Well, it's a good point. I mean, even in Dublin, in the city centre, I'm only returned in the last couple of years, and of course we're in lockdown. But that's one of the first thing I noticed about it. We have a street called Grafton Street. It's very iconic. It's pedestrian only, and people, there's a lot of musicians come, buskers, and some famous people have busked there in their early days, and young musicians come from all over Europe and the world to play there. And it's allowed, and it's a lovely sort of part of the culture, and the pubs are open and the seats are outside. But the facades of the shops have changed, and they're just like you said, they're those sort of, that brand, there's not so much
Yeah,
uniqueness to it, and you could be basically in a mall anywhere. And I, for one, just me, I sort of hark back to the old days. I prefer just the sort of the individuality of the mom and pop stores, as they maybe say
yeah.
in the US. It's not completely gone, but I live in a small town now in Tipperary of about 10,000 people, and we still have that, which is you go to the butcher's for your meat, you go to the vegetable shop for your vegetables. I mean, there are supermarkets outside of town, but the high street is still, owned, family owned businesses, and you get to know them and they know
Yeah.
you and stuff. So I love that, and that was still very much applicable in Latin America as well. But this is, again, this is the world as it is. As we mentioned, acceptance is the key. I mean, it is what it is.
So, what has been your personal journey of acceptance? What have been some of your life lessons when it comes around acceptance?
Well, I think it's a daily practice, really, isn't it? And I don't think it's just me. I think I do have a spiritual practice, a daily practice, and have had for 10, 15 years. And I suppose it's more about asking the right questions than finding the answers. Do you know what I mean? If that makes any sense. And so what I got very interested in about 15 years ago was I stumbled upon, or the other expression, when the student is ready, the
Yeah,
teacher appears. When you start to ask questions, these not necessarily the answers come up, but certainly thought provoking ideas, and all the great teachers prior to us, whether you're talking about Lord Buddha, Lord Hindu, Lord Jesus, they all pretty much said the same thing, at the core of the message. So I wanted to find out what's the truth, like am I seeing the world as it really is? I didn't think I was. There was a lot of confusion in my early years about, I think it's the conditioning of where I grew up as well. And nature
yeah.
versus nurture. The environment I was nurtured in had certain values, and so I think all of us are born into a certain order, a certain culture, and at some point in our life, usually through either suffering, the
Yeah.
death of a loved one or the loss of a job, or when our world is disrupted. I think that's an opportunity then to, for me anyway, it was an opportunity, and it came from losing, my mother quite young is when it started. She died quite young, and my world was, thrown upside down. But as I think it was Rumi said, there's a crack in everything. That's where the light comes in, and there's a lot of what I've learned a lot is a lot of the wisdom, and if I don't want to say I'm wise, but any of the wisdom I'm sort of learning comes through suffering usually. So, and I think we all have to sort of experience that. I think we have to have a certain order, then we have to sort of a disorder, if you will, and then a reorder. And so the reorder for me is, how can I see life as it really is? What's really going on here? Because there's so many, money is not the answer. Capitalism is not, I'm talking about
Yeah.
joy, right? Not pleasure. Like, how can you have a joyful, like, that feeling that is real, that, doesn't, there's no sort of it's not a high and a low. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's joy. Like, pleasure is
Yeah.
fleeting, which you might get from a new car. And, and I'm all for that. Like, I like to go on a nice holiday and I like to have the nice clothes, but I know it's not the answer, and I think the answer is among my daily interactions with my wife and my children and my neighbors. And, how do I think Eckhart Tolle said something, somebody was saying about, you can't really say, okay, now that I have all this, I'm successful. You can't really arrive at success. But what you can do is you can have a successful
Yeah.
day. So, one day where you do you're trying to be, I suppose, who you want to be. You're not, you're trying to help somebody if you can, and you're not going to hurt anybody if you can. That's a successful day, I
Yeah.
think.
And it's obviously more about your own definitions of success than trying to live up to someone else's measurement stick, whether it's your culture or maybe your upbringing or just your peers.
Yes. Yeah. True.
So is that something that you kind of had to disassociate over the years? Because you said you had to kind of reevaluate cultural upbringing.
Yes. Yes. Exactly. So I suppose, having grown up in Ireland, in a sort of there was no jobs here. There was 20% unemployment. There was violence. It was a dark period. Yet there was a lot of good in it as well. I mean, but so I went away, and I suppose initially I thought success was not being poor. That having money and having success, and I did. I mean, during my 20s, I had that sort of material success. I was driving a Porsche in Germany and
What else would you be driving in Germany?
a Volkswagen. But it didn't what some people call the God-shaped hole. Now I don't like to use the word God too much, because what it means to you and to me and to other people are our own interpretation. But there's this sort of hole, if you will, that money and stuff doesn't fill. So, as you said, I had to then ask myself, well, what does success look like to me? What will make me happy? What will keep me happy? And I didn't enjoy that corporate competitive environment because of how it made people behave. It wasn't really who I was. So I went, okay, it's probably better that I'm, if possible, independent and, more aligned with my own values. Because as a young man, I did get sort of carried away and, misinterpreted and, made mistakes as well that I had to learn from. But ultimately, it came back to being true to myself. What does, who do I want to be? How do I want to behave? What sort of a father and a mother, or, do you want to be? And so it's just being true to yourself. And then I think once you find, because I think we have that innate goodness in us, it's always there. Once we connect with that, the great result of that, or indirect result, is actually don't have to worry anymore about success or about what anybody thinks about me, because I'm being true to myself, you know. And I think what I learned was, if I can see myself for exactly who I am, and good and bad, assets and liabilities, like, imperfection. If I can see my own mistakes and imperfection, it also allows me to see the rest of the world more clear. And so there's less confusion. So I'm getting great clarity and less confusion by just trying to be true to myself, and it's a lovely journey. I wasn't on this journey my whole life, Hannes, and it's great to be now having had that sort of an awakening that, wow, I can learn something, every day. More can be revealed every day, and all I have to do is focus on my side of the street. I need to keep my life clean, not worry about anybody else, and then it all just happens. It's that it's an I think as well. You're probably familiar with the expression that there is no um, there is no road to happiness.
Yeah.
Happiness is the road. It's just waking up and making a decision. Who do I want to be? How do I want to behave? That's what I'm going to do, and everything else just falls nicely into place.
So, what was that process like for you to kind of re-evaluate or find your own set of values, like kind of your own North Star? Because you said you did get carried away as a young man, and maybe you went off stray based on the corporate and the peer-to-peer structure that was maybe you encouraging do something else. How did you find that maybe inner voice, that North Star in your own value system?
It wasn't just, I suppose, the corporate world. There was, I don't use alcohol or take drugs, but during my 20s I did. I partied, as most people in their 20s do.
Especially the Irish.
Yeah, if it's a pity it's not an Olympic sport, because we'd probably get some gold medals. But what I think.
That's for sure. That's for
Do
sure.
you know what I think it was? Is I think our birthright, all human beings have, our birthright is to be sort of happy, joyous, and free. So if I'm born happy, joyous, and free, how come at 30 years of age, when I'm in Germany or Panama and I've bought properties and I have nice cars and I'm taking nice holidays and I'm drinking to excess and eating to excess, how come I'm not happy? All the things that I've introduced into my life are blocking me from that source. And so what I realized was what is it was more a journey of subtraction than addition, meaning I didn't actually have to go and learn anything new. I just had to remove what wasn't working. And we spoke a bit earlier about getting a good night's sleep, right? All the good things for our well-being are free. Getting proper sleep, some spending time in your natural environment, having some meaningful work, meaningful relationships. For example, if you're in a job that you don't like, that you're doing for the money, it's harming you, right? Because 8 hours every day, you're going against your spiritual life is in a sort of a contrast. So just remove I just learned to look at closely what is good for me and what is not good for me. And lo and behold, I was being sold a lot of stuff that wasn't good. Money doesn't make you happy. Otherwise all the billionaires would be laughing all day and all the poor people would be. It's sort of the opposite, right? So I think, yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's about unblocking. I think the happiness is there. It's our natural way, but we can block it by just too much.
So how would you pack that in a life lesson, for example, for your daughter? If you were to pass that on, how would you encourage her to maybe not get stuck on the peer-to-peer comparison or the cultural baggage that comes with growing up in any place, but kind of evaluating that for herself?
Yeah, excellent question. I do talk about. My daughter's 16 and the next one is 12, and having sort of more of these conversations when the opportunity comes with the 16-year-old, and the key thing to me, whether it's 5 minutes of your day or whether it's 4 hours of your day is to have some sort of what I call a spiritual practice. And that can be, anything. It can be meditation, it can be just sitting still, it can be listening to a podcast. But what I like it to be is, I suppose trying to sort of get into a place of humility, which is a real honest look at myself. I mean, it begins with me. It sounds maybe a bit selfish, but it's actually not, because if I'm not behaving the way I want to be, nothing else will be right. I have to get myself right, So it begins with, again, who do I want to be? How can I be true to myself? Do I want to be a business person, or would I like to be in service? If I'm going to be in business, what sort of values? Is it going to be dog eat dog, or So again, a constant sort of evaluation of.
One could also be in business and be of service. In example, we've been talking about Elon Musk. I think he is of massive service, but he's also definitely in business.
Absolutely. No, I don't mean to say one, but I just mean each. I think if you want to grow spiritually and mentally, emotionally, the way to do it is self-evaluation, by getting to know yourself and who it is you want to be. And I think most people that do that find a good path, like a path of well-being. They don't say, well, actually, I want to take over the world. Like, usually it's, well, I want to be happy and I want other people to be happy. And, so I think it starts with that evaluation, and then it ends. Usually I also have a little 5 minutes at the end of every day just to see, well, where could I have done better, maybe, not what did I do wrong, but was I close to aligning, with who I want to be today? Or because often there might be a mistake there. I might have been impatient, or, with my wife, and I need to apologize for that so I can move on and grow. So, that to me, I mean, it's not a big sort of a deal, but I think that allows for, I think you're open then to a lot of growth. I think things then come to you because you're not blocked by resentment and anger, and you're sort of keeping as I said earlier, you're keeping your side of the street clean. And when you're clean and open, things come to you, then the opportunities, and, as you say, attraction rather than promotion, right? I mean, like attracts like,
Yeah, I think it certainly does. And once you're opening up to, and now you can use all kinds of words that might sound a bit fluffy, but once you behave a certain way, it attracts other people that want to see that behavior. And I think if you become a little bit more conscious about what is best practices for yourself, it attracts people that have similar set of ethics and values.
Yeah, no question, 100%. And likewise, I don't know have you ever heard of a book, Power versus Force? It's an interesting read. It's
I haven't. No.
That we all have different levels of consciousness, and we sort of depending what level we're at, we calibrate a certain energy. So the very lowest is sort of survival mode, where you might find people in the poorest regions of the world who really have nothing and nothing to live for. It's a very low calibration. It moves up and up, and so I think we're attracted to people with a similar calibration, a similar energy. And I've often experienced that, quite rarely, but you ever sort of meet somebody and there's just a deep peace about them, or you just feel like really at ease and really comfortable. To me, that's somebody who's calibrating very highly, probably, love or compassion, or, so I think, obviously, if we go into an energy field that's not attractive or that feels dangerous or anxious, then we tend to move away from that. And that's why, we have certain friends. We don't, it's not everybody we get on really, really well with. I mean, we get on quite well with most people, but there's certain people that we're, our wives and our partners, and that we're in a much more symbiotic sort of a calibration, So I think it's a natural occurrence as well if we're open to it and we have a little bit of awareness about it, which again comes from just that experience of being on the planet, and wanting to sort of not figure it all out, but sort of you wanting to sort of be at one, a part of this, this great sort of world that we're a part of.
I guess that's actually the lesson, to realize we are part of something and we're not individual from it or disconnected from it.
Yeah. It was just, you hear that from all the great teachers, Thomas Merton, who was a U.S., I think a Franciscan priest, but a sort of a mystic, I used to think years ago when people talked about a mystic that it was somebody who, was in a trance and they could see
lost their mind.
Yeah, they were sitting there sort of gravitating, and they would say things that were really deep that somehow you understood, but you had no idea where they got it from. But actually what I've learned is mystics are people who just make a bit more of an effort to see, to go beyond, to go deeper, to see things as they really are. And what I find out is that's available to all of us. And what you just said is absolutely true. I mean, Thomas Merton said that, because it can be confusing. You hear a lot about the false self, the ego, the true self, and which one is which? Am I both? So it's sort of challenging, right? But he said that the true self should always be seen as nothing separate from life itself, and therefore the false self is a person or a thing or a mindset that sees itself separate and not a part of. And, that's a lovely explanation. And you just said it as well. And to try to, I think Einstein said that we suffer from this sort of optical conscious illusion that we are separate. And he said, we're not. And it's because of time and space that we're a little bit, because we're sort of limited by time and space, which, is not linear anyway, then we're just, we can suffer from these delusions, I heard one other great thing, Hannes. Richard Rohr, who's also, he runs the Center for Action and Contemplation in New Mexico, I believe, another Christian mystic, but he talks about, he's really sort of a deep seer, but he talks about the same thing. I suppose it's along the lines of, I'm not in the universe, I am the universe. I'm a part of it, or I don't have a life. I am, life, So, but I think, we can have this conversation now, and I have an idea what I'm talking about, but, I'm going to go into town to collect the kids from school, and I'll be back in that illusion. It's constantly having to try to remind myself of what is the real deal here,
If COVID has taught us something, it's that we're definitely part of something, and it's, the virus made it a lot more tangible that we're not as separate as we might think, even so that from our internal experience, we might feel that we're quite separated from everybody else and from everything else.
Yeah, I guess it's a part of being, in this, physical body, right? As Sting said, we're a spirit. You're a spiritual, beings in a physical world. Look, it's hugely challenging, but what I find is the joy for me is not knowing all the answers. I mean, the universe is constantly spitting out more questions than answers. We don't know other than this is a great mystery. That's all we know. But just the idea of recognizing and being aware that there's so much we don't know is enough for me, rather than to be maybe where I used to be. My old self used to be more that I need to know and I need to be right. And, it's all black and white, and, you're right and I'm wrong, or I'm right and you're wrong, and I win, you lose, good, bad. No,
yeah,
it's not like that at all. It's just more of a daily, journey, daily learning, and just to be able to know you're sort of aware, that there's to remain teachable, I suppose. Yeah. Um, because
Yeah.
I think what happens, I think where it's challenging for people is you often see people and with material goods, with alcohol, with fame, with money, where they constantly are achieving something, and as soon as they achieve it, they set another goal and another and another, and it's never they never reach that fulfillment,
Yeah.
which tells me it's the wrong thing. It's not that nourishment. It's not that sustainable nourishment that you're after, which I find in nature.
I feel like whenever we reach whichever set goal we might have had, we realize, oh, this is not it. And then from that new peak, we're looking for the next thing. And for someone like Elon Musk, that literally means occupying Mars, because he gained that level of capability where he mastered Earth to some degree. So I guess one would argue for a human, it's never enough unless we actually explore it for ourselves, and it might just not be in the material world that kind of crystallizes around ourselves.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question. Just using Elon Musk as an example, or other, I suppose, high achievers and stuff. Um, what makes them tick? What gets them up every morning? Um, I honestly feel that to want to sort of be the richest man in the world, or the most successful, or even to be the CEO of a company, I think that's a little bit of a spiritual malady in people. It's not the answer, and it never is. And often people can sacrifice, their life, 20, 30, 40 years of their life, their families, um, for a career, or for something that when they finally reach that goal, it doesn't do it, um, or people who work their whole life and then, have a very short window to retire and go and sit, amongst nature.
Yeah,
So, but it's all evolution as well, isn't it? I mean, we're just part of the Big Bang. You know the way people say the Big Bang happened 13.4 billion years ago. No, this is the Big Bang. We are the Big Bang. It's still happening. So we just happen to have
yeah,
been.
it's happening.
Yeah, we are a part of the Big Bang. It didn't happen a long time ago. It's happening right now, and it's going to keep happening long after we're gone. So we're just on this little roller coaster ride. We're getting a little glimpse of it. Um, and yeah, maybe the best thing is to just enjoy it as much as possible and not maybe take it too serious, other than
Yeah,
to be good to yourself, be good to your. Yeah, I think kind-heartedness, is would be the biggest attribute I'd like to continually have, you know, to be kind and loving towards all, beings, if I think you won't ever have a problem in the world if you can, sort of, if that's your goal. I think, um, but yeah, it's a great topic. I mean, we could talk here for a long time, and it's asking questions, isn't that? I think that's what we're doing. We're asking questions, and we're not getting the answers, but we're not getting the full answer, but that's okay. I'm just happy we're asking the question.
well, I have two thoughts on this. First is my yoga teacher always reminds us that what we don't know is so much bigger than what we do know. And then one of the quotes I love from, I think it's Alan Watts, is life is a dance that's meant to be experienced. And you don't dance to arrive at a certain spot in the room, but to dance.
If I can live in that idea that you just, mentally, spiritually, then you're right. That is where it's at, like you've probably heard this as well, that we're human beings, not human doings, so do
Yeah,
less and just be more, but that's where the pleasures are. I mean, I'm going to go into town now in an hour. There's an old castle in the middle of town. There's two churches on each side, Protestant and Catholic, by the way. I don't know. It's funny the way they build two churches right beside each other. I mean, I don't think God would have needed two,
It's
right? One will do, like. But anyway, that's more political, I suppose. But there's a lovely old castle built in the 15th century, and the grounds are beautiful. It's landscaped. There's little park benches, and I'll go in there half an hour before my daughter comes out of school, and it might well be the highlight of my day. And I'm
yeah,
not eating, I'm not drinking, I'm not thinking about money. I'm just sitting still. Do you know what? It's a nice meditation, Hannah. I that you might try. It's more of a contemplation, and it's called a noise or a sound meditation. And it's a lovely one to do if you go to Central Park, right? Sit in a bench, and what you focus on is just the noises you're hearing. Because you know the way when you're walking along, there's a bit of a buzz of daily life, right? But when you just sit down and say, well, I'm going to identify every single thing I hear. So it'll begin and you'll hear a little bird is over here. There's another bird here. There's somebody washing dishes over there. And, it's amazing place you get to because you realize you're just a sort of a small part, and there's all these little things coming to you, which is daily life, and that you're also happen to be a part of. But there's something about the way they come to you individually, and you realize, wow, there's 17 different things I'm hearing here. Whereas before I began, I wasn't really hearing anything. Try it out. It's a really nice sort of contemplation for 5 or 10 minutes.
yeah, that sounds lovely. And I mean, I love to go to the park because it also kind of takes out the actual city noise, which is a lot of that roaring and buzzing. And, the deeper, especially now that the spring has kind of brought back the leaves, the sounds are gone and faded, and you can literally sit with nature and trees and tune into the birds.
Yeah.
And
I think spending some time every day in our natural environment it's equal to getting sort of 8 hours sleep in terms of our well-being. If we, for example, if you go a month without being in your natural environment, I think you'll be feel more disconnected than if you did. It's like I
yeah,
go swimming in the sea, in the ocean here, and that's like pure immersion into your natural environment. I mean, first of all, it's really, really
yeah,
cold, so you think you're going to, but you feel so good after because it's just you're completely, you're just complete. The only thing is the environment. You forget about everything, you know. But after you get that
that's
feeling of
because it's so
peace.
cold.
Yeah, it actually is. It's your body thinks it's going to die, so it plummets. The body temperature goes down, but then it adjusts and it realizes, okay, we're not going to die. I rate it a spiritual experience jumping in the Atlantic Ocean. You feel wonderful after it. Now it is cold, but but it's very good for your immune system because your immune system is fit as it can be because on a daily basis it's jumping into action. It's also very good for you have a nerve, I think, which regulates how calm you
The
can
Vegas nerve.
stay. Yeah, it also is good for that because your body thinks it's in a life-threatening situation, even though it's not. But your mind is completely calm because you're just having a swim. So it sort of regulates that as well. But yeah, natural environment. I mean, I absolutely do 30, 45 minutes a day in the woods or the forest or sitting under a tree or swimming in the ocean because it's as important as getting a full night's sleep.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. The Japanese actually coined a term for it, and they're trying to scientifically back it up more and more. It's the forward bathing.
I mean, for the last, how long have we been sort of in a civilized society? And like we've only had electricity for what, 150 years? So, for a million years
Yeah,
before that, we were in that Arcadian cycle of natural light. Electricity is not necessarily the best thing, in terms of our Arcadian rhythm, So there are all of these little, what I love as well, Hannes, is that most of the things that are good for you, your well-being are free. In fact, all of
Yeah.
them probably are if you look closely enough. Sitting in nature, um, having good intentions about people, having a sort of cultivating kind-heartedness towards people doesn't cost anything. And it takes the same amount of energy
Yeah.
as the opposite, which might, so, again, it's about sort of unblocking what doesn't work and allowing what does work to sort of take place.
I find it quite stunning how big the medical industry, not only in the US, is. Originally, I was looking at the US, I was like, wow, this system here is interesting. But now looking back at Germany, I must admit, Germany is not doing a lot better. And all of the levels of medication and treatments that are available that could be really addressed on a fundamental level with just becoming a little bit more conscious about sleep and eating habits and movement in people's days. Like, actually, a large chunk of the cardiovascular disease are just based on overconsumption of also light disruption, for TVs and things at night instead of sleeping proper, not eating proper or not eating at the right time, not having enough movement. Those are all things that can be avoided so easily and literally for free.
I agree with you. And I think as well, a lot of these, sort of, not to say, no, I don't mean to say this in every case because I'm not a doctor at all, but I think a lot of antidepressants are a large part of what they do. It's psychosomatic, which is like if I'm not feeling good, as soon as, like, let's say my wife makes an appointment at the doctor for me, it's been proven scientifically that even while I'm on the way to the doctor, I begin to feel better because I know I'm about to, and if he gives me an
Yeah.
aspirin as opposed to a Prozac and I take it
Yeah.
and keep taking it for a month, what will happen as well is if I had just, it's natural sometimes to feel a little bit down, right? If I was just, going through a period for a week or two where I wasn't feeling great, which is a natural thing that can happen, then at some point I'm going to feel better. But people think it was the antidepressant when it probably
Yeah.
was one, psychosomatic because I went to the doctor, and two, if you're not feeling, this too shall pass. If you feel really, really good one day, enjoy it because it's not going to last forever. If you feel really bad one day, don't worry about it because they're not going to feel that way forever. So there's a constant, look at the four seasons, winter, spring, summer. Um, so yeah, these
Well, in Panama,
pharmaceuticals
you
are
didn't have four seasons.
no, exactly. That's maybe. Let me tell you one thing. I don't know what the numbers are, but you see very, very, very few, if any, people in the tropics that suffer from mental illness. you know, you honestly, like, they have a very peaceful. Anyway, that's gone beside. But I agree with you that look, pharmaceuticals it's a business and they want to sell their product, and it's just mind-boggling now, the so-called sort of mental issues and stuff, especially with young kids. I mean, getting medicated very early, and it's sad. Hopefully we'll move away from that in the future. But as you just said, if you just get your, there's more than one thing, right? But those things of getting proper rest, eating the right food, getting some exercise, getting into your natural environment, maybe doing some service within your community, and being of service to your neighbors or whoever. If you're doing like 5 or 6 of those things daily, you're probably going to feel okay, because all of those
Yeah.
contribute to well-being. Whereas fast food, lack of sleep, too much alcohol, in a job I don't like, how are you going to feel? You're not going to feel, you know.
But it's a personal exploration, and I guess people follow suit with what they see in culture, and culture doesn't always suggest best practices.
No, and also I don't preach. I mean, I'm just sharing with you my experience, and this is how it has been for me. And if somebody, it's about sort of attraction, like, rather than, I'm not an evangelist. I don't even mention to anybody unless they ask me, or me and you happen to discover in a conversation that we're interested in meditation and spirituality. Um, unless it's sort of, I never go around sort of, pointing the finger type of thing and, oh, do this and do
You
that.
have to,
If,
like a good
yeah,
Irish Catholic.
yeah, yeah, exactly. No, I mean, really, all I can share is my experience, what happened, what life used to be like for me, what sort of happened and how it is now, and what works for me. And if somebody is attracted to that and wants to maybe incorporate some of that into their life, then I'll be happy to tell them what I did. But no, again, we're part of this greater thing, right? And that's who's in charge. I'm not sure what that is. Our creator or divine intelligence, call it what you will, but I know I'm not it, and that's who is in charge. And if you'll allow me, I'll use the word God, but I'm only using God in the sense of, so people, I'm talking about a higher power. If there is this one higher power, then that higher power is, I'm not it, and it's in charge. So I'll try and be a part of it, but I don't know the answers.
But just like a coin has two sides, you can't be separated from, like, creation can't be separated from the creator. So in a way, you might just be it.
Good point. Yeah, I think it's a bit like, have you ever heard that story of you brought 10 blindfolded men into a room, and there was an elephant in the room, and none of them had ever seen or they knew what an elephant was, right? So everyone,
I've heard the story. Go ahead.
Yeah. So after they each, one tipped the tusk, one had the tail, one had the hind leg, one had. So after they all sat in the room, they asked them, describe what an elephant is. Every one of them told you a different story, and everyone was right. Right? That's sort of, I think we get a glimpse, if we're lucky enough to get a glimpse. But yeah, we are a part of it, but not the whole, if you know what I mean. Again, what we're trying to do here, Hannes, is to put stuff into words that cannot be put into words. I think, you know what I mean? Some of it.
So we're foolish for the attempt.
No, we're having a healthy go at it, but we sort of know, we're the blindfolded men with the elephant.
Yeah, we have a really incomplete picture of what creation might be or might not be. Just think about how small. Like I'm in this big city, this major metropolitan area. But even if I just zoom out from an airplane, it already looks small, despite all the concrete going north and south. Then if I zoom out to maybe orbit, it gets smaller and smaller on the continent, Yeah. And that's just a fraction of our solar system.
Yeah.
And then we're not even further out into what actually might be out there. So
exactly. I mean, it's beyond our comprehension. I mean, literally, it is beyond our comprehension. What are the infinite possibilities, So, but to me, that's where the freedom is knowing we're just a very, very small part of some amazing mystery, and enjoy the ride, You don't have to have all the answers. You don't even have to seek them all, but just sort of be aware that, it's just a great, great mystery, and it's a sort of what are the chances of even being born, 1 trillion to one or something. I mean, just to have been, in a physical body is like, so.
Yeah.
So, yeah, but I think, again, just, sort of just knowing, that expression, those who know don't know, those who don't know. So I know I don't know, and that's good enough. There's the freedom for me. I don't have to have all the answers. And anybody who comes to me and tells me they have the answers,
no, you just haven't contemplated on that enough. That if you actually think you have the answers.
Yeah. And I suppose in my younger years, I think I thought that maybe, I didn't get the guidebook on life, that everybody seemed to know something I didn't.
You weren't there in that day in school. They missed you, when they handed it out.
Yeah, exactly. I fell off the tree that day and hit my head on a branch on the way down. But I honestly felt like that until I sort of had this sort of, awakening, if you will. And what I realized though is anybody who says they know doesn't know, and the wise ones are the ones who don't know. So, and I love that expression, those who know don't know, and those who don't know. And some people, like when you say, they can't sort of, but if you think about it and contemplate on it, you go, okay.
So we started the conversation speaking about rare precious metals, but we're kind of realizing that the rare and precious thing here is the human experience and being a human being at the end of the day.
Absolutely. And it's just, we've 70, 80, 90, maybe 100 years on the planet. And I do feel if we're living, if we get the spiritual side of things right, that more will constantly be revealed. So I'm looking forward to what I'm going to learn, ahead, and just to continue learning, and again, it's coming. It's, as I said, more is revealed. It's, if we get that spiritual element correct, uh, I don't feel I have to worry about anything else. Everything else will fall into place, But if I get that wrong, my focus is on the money, say just with the metals that, I just want to make money and that's it. Then it doesn't bring the happiness. It's about, how I interact with people during that journey and that daily basis. And, it's so easy as well, just, to interact with people, a little hello and a smile and a thank you and connection, just connection with
Yeah.
people. But yeah, it's exciting. I mean, it's an exciting time to be alive. And yeah, you'd wonder where it will all go. I mean, we'll be long gone in 500 years, and I wonder how we'll have done then.
And in the grand scheme of things, of the 13.8 billion years of the Big Bang experience, it all doesn't matter.
No, no, it won't. No, I mean, it
Which
won't.
is quite liberating.
Yes, yeah. I am no one. Isn't that it?
Yeah. Like, I always find it quite liberating to think, we think it's so important what other people think of us or what we do with our life. And then, okay, it might be important for the people you meet in the day that rather than leave them in anger, leave them in joy. That in that human experience, that might be important. But in the grand scheme of things, it makes no difference whether I fly to Mars or I build a rocket flying to Mars or I don't.
No.
It's really, it boils down to the human experience of every individual in their own life.
Yes. And every human is completely interconnected, or even Thai Nhat Hanh uses the phrase interbeing. If you, as he says, if you just look at your morning coffee, you can see the entire cosmos. The entire cosmos is in your morning coffee. The sun, on the
Yeah.
plants, the farmer who planted the coffee, the person who made the cup, the milk, the water, earth, sun, water, everything. And just, if you just contemplate, in order for that cup of coffee to be here in front of me today, how many people were involved, how many days were involved, and it all just came together at this moment in time for me to enjoy my coffee. And that's what I try to
Yeah.
remember, because if I don't do that, I'm not present. I'm not really living, and I do. I mean, my mind wanders all the time. I mean, but I do try to be sort of conscious and present to that stuff, because that's life going by, and, if we're in the future or the past, we're not in the present. We don't have, the only place we can be, you know?
That's right. I mean, the future is our imagination and the past is our memory. Like
Mm.
if I were to fall on my head, the past would be gone.
Yeah, I like that. I haven't heard it that way before. The future is my imagination, and the past is my memory, which, yeah, it's a good way to look at it. And you hear like people say, well, if you're feeling anxious, it's because you're in the future. If you're feeling a bit sad or depressed, it's because you're in the past. But if you're feeling at peace, you're probably in the present, you know.
Yeah, it's like, those moments when we go to a beautiful place, and a journey sometimes allow us to physically disconnect, which allows for the mental to disconnect too, which is why people enjoy travels and vacations, because it completely disconnects from the areas or the surroundings that constantly remind us of what is or should be going on in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
Like, a certain person will be triggered by a certain environment over and over again, and the environment actually reinforces what is going on in their mind. So why is traveling or a vacation so nice and relaxing? It's because we actually go to a different place where we don't have those associations yet in our mind.
Mm-hmm.
And interesting enough, when people do go to other places, they tend to create similar patterns. So after maybe moving to a new town, they suddenly have similar friends or similarly bad patterns if they don't consciously choose to act differently.
Yeah, and it's a good point because people do sometimes, and I have done it in the past, is make what you call it like a geographical move. I'm not feeling quite comfortable. Everything's not exactly the way it should be, but if I go over there, it will be. But wherever I go, there I am. Like I'm bringing everything, nothing's been, and it sort of feels like it's different and it works for a while. But then, as you said, the same patterns emerge, because we've changed the exterior, but we haven't made that fundamental interior change, which is, if things are not maybe the way I'd like them to be, it's me that has to change. It's not, it's not the outside world or other people. It's I have to take a look at myself, which goes back to what we were talking about is self-evaluation, and am I being true to the person I want to be, or am I out of alignment with that? Did I
Yeah.
hurt somebody today? Do I need to make an apology? That's not who I am. I need to set that right. I think as well, being able to say I was wrong and I'm sorry is a big part, because I think it clicks you back into where you need to be. If we don't own and apologize for any sort of mistakes or confusions, I think they stay within, and they block us from happiness, what we call happiness. So it's important and it's okay to make mistakes and to be selfish, because I find just about everything I do is tainted with some selfishness, which is my primal instinct, which is self-preservation. So I have to analyze that. Is that completely who I am, or is that just a part of? What's my real intention? In business or in personal. What do I? Why am I really? Is it in alignment with who I want to be, or is it, selfishness or self-seeking? Am I? So it's not about sort of trying to become this great person. It's being sort of more aware of who you really are, what your real motivations are. And if they're not in alignment with who you'd like to be, then make changes. And if you make the changes, you'll get the results. But, invariably people tend to blame the boss or the wife or, somebody, for their unhappiness, and move country or move job or move wife. And they find, you'll often find people who are, divorced once that will be divorced a second and a third time. It doesn't address, that restlessness, that irritableness that comes with sort of not being aligned with who, you really are. And you can be aligned with the fact that you don't know, it's the realm of certainty where
Yeah.
we run into trouble, and a lot of religions, for example, they try to, they talk about certainty that, God is this, and if you do this, he'll be happy. That's completely not it, but it is. We could talk for hours here, Hannes. It's such a good discussion,
Yeah.
but yeah, I think
It is.
It's
literally
again,
going on forever. Yeah, I'll give you some more time to contemplate on life, sit under some trees, and then we will have a round two with more insights.
yes, exactly, because there's always more, and it's amazing though as well that I think it's a good indication or sign of, for example, our fathers or our grandfathers, right, in Germany and Ireland, they couldn't have, in their wildest dreams, thought their grandson would be in New York on this machine with their grandson in Tipperary having these discussions that they'll then share with the world. Like, that's 50 years, right? I mean,
Yeah.
it's just amazing, So let's have another session. I've really enjoyed it, and it's been a wonderful conversation.
Me too. Thank you so much, Louis, for your time and your insights, not only on precious metal, but the precious experience of life. And yeah, thank you so much. And just for the audience, where can people connect with you?
Myself and Elon Musk are moving to a planet. No, I'm joking. So the website is Strategic Metals Invest, and the email, you can email me directly. It's Louis, Louis, at strategicmetalsinvest.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. And this was a very deep dive, not only into earth and precious metals, but life. So I had a blast, and I appreciated our conversation so much, and looking forward to basically round 2.
Thank you, Hannes.
Thank you for joining us at The Path to Wealth. We hope you enjoyed today's episode. Check out our upcoming guests and be sure to share it with all your friends and family that want to take their life to the next level of wealth.